Well, good morning again. By way of introduction, my name is Swenson, and I am not a banker. I run a human resources and leadership consulting company in Los Angeles, and we have about 300 small business clients. By small, I mean generally less than 300 employees. And we do human resources and leadership. And the reason I tell you that is to tell you this. What I want to talk about today is based on work with those businesses. About 10% of our clients are banks, but we have nonprofits in every sector. And a lot of the lessons we've been learning from our clients and working with them apply to you. And those are kind of what I wanted to talk about today. And so I want to talk about the components of a great place to work. And today, those are communication and leadership and culture and talent. And I want to briefly touch on each of those in terms of what we're looking at, what we're seeing today. And I want to start with a little bit of information on what's going on in the workforce today, because what's happening externally in the workforce is informing our views on how to talk about culture and leadership and communication and talent. So part of the challenge right now is that instead of looking 2 years ahead or 10 years ahead, most business leaders are looking 1 quarter ahead at best. And in terms of leadership, it's not being done with a lot of intention because there are more people out there, but fewer workers. And most businesses have figured out how to do more with fewer employees. And because of all the things that are going on, we tend to not lead with intention. It doesn't become the first thing we do. It becomes a second or secondary thing to everything else that's going on. So some myths for you that a lot of people don't realize right now. So I want to bust some myths, but the first myth is employees care what company they work for. When they apply for a job with you, they care very much what company they work for. But a year or 2 or 3 years later, they care less about the company and more about the team that they're on. And we've moved to a society and a business of teams. And when we do exit interviews and we analyze those, we say, what are you going to miss most? I'm going to miss the people I work with. That's what we see over and over and over again. So team becomes critical. Another myth is people want feedback. No, they don't. I will talk more about that in a second. They do not want feedback. Leadership training is really important. You can't train it away. If you say, boy, our people need leadership, you send them away to leadership school for 1 day, and they'll forget 90% of what they learned 6 months later. It needs to be more of an ongoing developmental process than just training something away. HR would tell you that retention is the #1 measure of success. I'm going to argue against that, especially at banks, especially at more rural banks. I would argue against that. Experience is essential in hiring. Actually, now it's becoming the antithesis of essence. Aptitude and potential are replacing experience as the critical components of that. Millennials have ruined our workforce. Well, possibly. Depends on your point of view. But for sure, their impact is way overemphasized in the workplace. And then finally, work-life balance is really important. If somebody could tell me exactly what work-life balance is, then I might be able to tell you, yes, it's important. But I know people who work 60 hours a week and think they have great work-life balance. I know people who work 30 hours a week who think they're completely off whack on those types of things. So work-life balance becomes a one-size-fits-one impact, as opposed to something that we can blanket cover for everybody. So those are some of the myths. Some of the things we're finding that are true are, and you know this as bankers better than anybody, every company is a technology company. Every business now needs to lead with technology. I would suggest that if you're a hiring manager or you're an executive, 3 areas in which you need to manage expectations. The first one is, if you hire somebody today and they stay with you for 3 years, congratulations. That is a great hire. It is the way it is, Kevin. We have clients that want entry-level customer service positions to all have a bachelor's degree. The definition of requiring education as a component of hiring has changed. And it's going to continue to change because what we're seeing in the workplace is, and you'll see in a minute, people with college degrees are in demand and they're employed already. But secondly, and this is a little bit more scary, fewer and fewer people are signing up for a 4-year university. Fewer and fewer. They're seeing their older brothers and sisters just saddled with this huge debt. They're taking a look and seeing that a lot of people without college degrees are starting their own business and becoming successful without that. So we right now are seeing a trend to fewer people getting college degrees. And the people who do have college degrees are happy in their jobs, they're satisfied with the amount of money they're making, and they're content. So requiring a 4-year or all of these other things has changed. And then job jumping and the so-called employee loyalty. Employees have no loyalty. They don't want to. They saw their parents 12 years ago in the recession get laid off by companies. They don't want to do loyalty back. It's over. And by the way, if somebody's had 3 different jobs with 3 different companies in 10 years, that person brings more to the table, at least for the 15 people that I employ, because they have different perspectives, they've seen different things, and if they've left for the right reasons, I'm perfectly willing to hire somebody with 3 different companies in 10 years because that person brings more to the table than just the one perspective of somebody who stayed with one company for 10 years. Employees are overwhelmed. Leadership is at a tipping point. And I want to talk about that more specifically in a couple of minutes. And then the critical component right now is, as a leader, to understand what your values are, what your culture is, and compete on that. Because if people come to you because you're the best paying bank, they're going to leave you for a better offer down the road. So what is so essential about your business? Why would a great employee want to come to work for you? Why would a good employee want to stay with you? What are those reasons, excluding pay? Because that's what we're competing on. All right, on December 31st, the oldest millennial turned 39 years old. So anytime somebody wants to talk about millennials and say those kids, they're full of it, right? They're not kids anymore. Hey, they're pushing a lot of us older people out, but they're not really about millennials. And everything I learned from leadership when I started 30 years ago to the time today was, you don't manage a generation anyway, you manage one by one. Every person does different. So if you say, well, all millennials want this, I better treat everybody the same way, you're losing a bet. You're not doing what needs to be done. One size fits one. A concern I have on a macro basis is where employees are going to come from, and I alluded to this a moment ago. Today, this moment, there are 6.5 million job openings in the United States. There are plenty of jobs, there just aren't plenty of skills or fit, whatever you want to call that. 1 out of 7 people are voluntarily unemployed. Unemployment rate for college graduates in the United States is the lowest it's been since the Korean War. Now, the same unemployment rate, if you're a high school graduate, is 5.3%. So if I have an opening for a teller or a customer service person, I have 2 choices. Try to find somebody who's a college graduate, pay them $16 an hour, and have them leave in 6 months, because that's what they'll do. Or I would prefer to hire a high school graduate who scores off the charts for customer service aptitude, who's going to love that job, be passionate about that job, and stay with you for longer. So I'm willing to take a bet on those types of things. The gig economy right now, pending coronavirus, pending a future recession, is going crazy. People can work from home, they're making money, they don't have to commute, they don't have to dress up, they can stay home in their jammies and work all day. And they're happy to do it. And something new is a couple of studies are now showing that employees are largely not moving. 5 years ago, 50% of people under the age of 40 moved once or twice for a job. That number has dropped in half because of remote work, because business is coming to them as opposed to other places. So the idea that we're going to get people to move or relocate is becoming less and less a likelihood today. I talked about overwhelmed. My wife is a banker. On Friday we were here, she worked for 9 hours. I think she worked for 6 hours on Saturday, and I'm going to do everything I can to keep her from working today. And she's in the room, and I'll pick on her later. Maybe. No country takes as high a percentage of vacation and leaves it on the table than Americans do. This is in 2018. And by the way, California, if you're from California, is a state that requires a business not to have a use it or lose it vacation policy. So in California, there's about 40 million vacation days a year that don't go unused, but they roll over. In almost every other state, these are lost vacation days forever. So people are willing to forfeit this to work because they're so uncomfortable. So of the 4 areas we talked about, this is the first one, communication. And the 4 C's right now are clarity and candor and courage and concentrating. So we do a lot of employee surveys, and I've never seen a survey in 15 years that said, please don't communicate anymore, we're overserved at the communication bar. I don't see that happening anymore. They're asking for more, and just because you think you're communicating a lot does not mean it's true, because they want more. They're looking for more. One of the key elements in leadership is trust. People have to trust their leaders. They have to trust the company they work for. It's becoming an issue because you lose trust when there's uncertainty. The way to get over uncertainty is to communicate. When in doubt, we assume the worst. What's your name? Noresh, I'm Eric. Let's do this. If I'm your boss and I come up to you one day and I say, I want to see you, Noresh, at the end of the day in my office, do you think you're going to be getting a raise or a bonus or a promotion? No, we default to the worst, right? It's going to be the worst possible thing that could happen. So uncertainty creates this because doubt, our minds go to the dark side immediately. But when you communicate well, we reduce that uncertainty. And it becomes a critical error to not communicate a lot. The most common cause of uncertainty, and this is essential in banks, is change. It's change. It moves us from what we know to what we unknown. And the reason I mention that is that when we work with banks, the biggest employee concerns are we going to get bought out? When are we going to merge? What's going to happen? And that creates uncertainty and doubt. That creates morale issues. The performance review is a once-a-year thing. And it should be kind of the culmination of what an employee already knows. One-on-ones are the new performance management. It's very difficult. Most managers say, I am so busy, I don't have time. But even a couple of minute interaction is better than no interaction whatsoever. So I couldn't recommend more that people think about doing that managers talk about that. I have found that the more people know, the more they can help us. I talk about weaknesses a lot. I'm writing a book on it right now. And I tell every employee I work with, this may not come as a surprise to you, and especially the people who know me, I'm not the most organized person of all time. As a matter of fact, scattered would be an appropriate word. So I tell every employee, I am completely disorganized. I need you to help keep me disorganized. I want to be as honest as I can about my failings, because the more I find, the more people know, the more they're willing to help. I'm an optimist when it comes to that. So in thinking about what makes you transparent at your bank, a couple of things that come to mind. Salaries. Employees think they know everything there is about salaries, and I've never met an employee who thinks they're underpaid, ever. It's amazing how this happens. Come to think of it, I own my own company and I think I'm underpaid. Here's what happens. People look at LinkedIn or they get a phone call from a recruiter, and your people are getting calls from recruiters constantly. And they say, I can make 15% by jumping banks. Or they have a friend at the bank down the street, and the friend says, well, I make 40% more than you do. The way to eliminate this uncertainty is to have salary bands saying, at our bank, this position has these types of ranges. More and more tech companies, which are going to compete with your banks, are posting their salaries online. There's a social media company called Buffer. And if you want to buffer Google and buffer salary transparency, you'll see a spreadsheet of every single person's salary, their name, their title, and their salary, including the CEO. And more tech companies are going to that model as a way of eliminating uncertainty and doubt and gossip about salary. It might be a little scary for some of us in this room to do that, but that's why. We no longer live in an era where we say, do it because I said so. People want to know why. They want to know why. They want to have a purpose when they have work. They want to have their work have meaning. And it's not about just doing a task. What's important about doing the task? And then the elephant in the room conversation, which is a whole other story for another day. We tend to push these off forever, and I'm the worst at it. We'll talk about that. So in terms of communication, changing the air, everybody should know this, and I think you do. You're the sum of the people you spend the most time with. And great employees want to be with great employees. They don't want to be with losers. I used to work for a boss who said at conferences like these, and sales conferences, he goes, you're only hanging out with your top people. You're not hanging out with the bottom people. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to hang out with those losers. I only want to hang out with people who are great. Well, you kind of have to hang out with everybody. Employees need to understand today, and this is a critical thing that I would like you to know, that expertise now and potential now is more important than tenure. People tell me all the time about this millennial generation that's so entitled, but some of the most entitled people I've ever seen in my career are like the 25-year employee who does an average job, who thinks they deserve a raise and a promotion just because they've been there for 20 years. And it doesn't work that way anymore. It's what can you do for me in the future? And the sooner everybody understands this, you'll see a mindset change. Those mediocre 20-year employees will either figure out a way of doing better or they'll self-select out. And they need to. Everybody at your bank knows who the lousy employees are. Your managers all know who their bottom performers are. The question is not who the bottom performers are. The question is, why are we keeping them? We get uncomfortable with hard conversations, okay? Why? Primarily because we're hardwired to be liked. We want to be liked. If somebody really legitimately says, well, I don't care what anybody else thinks of me, well, that's the very definition of a sociopath, right? We care about what people think. And so we want to be liked. We want to be the nice manager. We want to be the nice bank. But what happens is, the longer you let that go out, the worse the situation happens. I know lots of bosses who regret keeping people on too long. I know very few who regret getting rid of them too quickly. When in doubt, fire. I got married for the first time and only time when I turned 48 years old, which means I dated for a lot of years. And the one thing I learned about dating all those years is it does not get better with age. If in the first couple of months it's bad, it's never going to get better over a period of time. It just isn't. So the barriers to tough conversation are those. And if you don't have tough conversations and we don't talk to somebody, then we end up talking about them a lot. And the more you end up talking about people, the less gets done and the more your time gets dragged down. So a couple of ways I would have a tough conversation with an employee is to identify the issue and then end with this. I got this from Brene Brown, so I can't say it's my original, but I like it. If we continue to have this conversation, you can't work here anymore. And that leads them to understand if and when you terminate them, they've been put on notice. And that's a really good way of doing things. Okay. In 2004, I wrote a book based on my experience of working with different managers, and I identified what I thought was the single most important component of leadership, which is communication. And I did another study of the leaders I work with, the CEOs I work with around the Western United States, and the same thing hit. It's still communication is the number one most important thing. As a matter of fact, my newest book, which by the way is available on March 18th, just in case you're curious, talks about communication as well. A component of communication I think is underestimated is the ability to listen. Most of us, and I lead the pack, are lousy listeners. And what I find is most leaders are looking for the next conversation, or they're looking to respond to somebody as opposed to taking a deep breath and saying, let me listen. The same thing I think applies in, are you interested in what I have to say, or are you interested in the person over your shoulder? Not yours, you specifically, Jeremiah. But am I looking for the next person? If you're really focused in on somebody, it becomes essential. A couple of reasons I like video screens now for candidates. When I'm on the phone with somebody, I tend to also look at my computer screen and answer emails and think I can multitask, which is a bunch of nonsense. When I'm being videotaped or on live video, I don't have that out. So I'm really focused on somebody. Second area, culture. 4 areas of culture that I would like to discuss. 2 types of employees, actually 3. They're the ones who are lousy, who don't care, who want out, who should be out. There are people who are really engaged. They love what they do. They can't wait to come to work most days. They're really happy. And then there are people who just accept a paycheck. They just show up. And I think as leaders, those are the people who are defining our culture because those people are the majority of our employees. Those are the people we need to think about. So culture, and by the way, Steve of Wolfpack is going to be talking about, I know he's here somewhere, there he is, Boston accent. He's going to be talking about how to do a culture audit tomorrow, and it would be something I want to talk about and agree with. But culture is how things get done. It's not your employee handbook. It's not the manifesto from on high. It's how things really get done. In a branch, from branch to branch, I would say most cultures are different, at least with the clients we work with. That's their culture. That's how they do things. So when you think of culture, today what we see are these things. Purpose. What is the reason I'm here? What is the reason I am working for this bank? Opportunity. What are the chances I have? I want to celebrate successes. I want to have appreciation. I want people to think about my well-being and leadership. That's culture. And companies are starting to intentionally design this. And I know Steve will talk about that tomorrow. And I think that's really great. But here's the thing. Either you have a culture that you have defined, or your culture is being defined for you in actions of your employees and your remote managers and leadership and things like that. And I would submit it's much better to intentionally design that culture than the other way around. A couple of areas to start is leadership, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Physical environment, the type of work you do, all those things. But if you do one thing or two things, that's enough. If you come out of a culture audit or you say, I want to do 30 things, they'll never get done or they'll be all screwed up. So a couple of things is plenty in designing your culture. I can't tell you how many hours I've spent with clients over the year nitpicking on dress code. And dress codes have changed over the years. One of the most successful clients I have, the owner is 32. It's a $60 million business. He has 50 employees. Every single one of them are in t-shirts and shorts and flip-flops. 40 of the 50 of them have dogs. The owner bought a business in West Hollywood next to a dog park, so every 2 hours they all go out and walk their dogs. $50 million company, 40% profitability. I took a bank president there who relaxed in a suit, and I thought the man was going to have a heart attack. I did. Your dress code says so much about you. And think about where your culture was 15 or 20 years ago, wherever you were working. It was likely in a coat and tie. I quit my job at age 40 to start my own company because my company at the time, Paychecks, they do a payroll, they're a great company. They made us wear a suit every day, not just a coat and tie, a suit. I got tired of being told what to do. It's different today. We can't go back to the good old days. I didn't hire somebody as my project coordinator, this young lady, because I was really worried. She has a nose ring and a full sleeve of tattoos. She's about 25. But she was brilliant. I didn't think that would be good. I hired 2 other people who both quit within a month. And I said, the heck with it. And she's doing phenomenally. She's been there a month. She's all over it. I suddenly realized I care less about that than I do about performance. And a lot of bankers will say, well, our customers want this. Of course they expect a certain level of dress, but they care less and less about it today than they did 5 years ago. And I suspect they're going to care less and less about it more in 5 years from now. And it's something to think about. It's not just the way you dress, it's the way you appear. I dress this way because I choose to, not because I'm being told to. That's a big thing with me, autonomy. But if you don't adapt, people are going to go someplace where they can do this. They're going to work from home in their jammies, or they're going to go to a place where they can be more casual, or they're going to be a place more glamorous. In the Western United States, that's technology, that's entertainment, that's stuff where I can be free to be me, and people can do that. I'm not saying we are taking employees for granted, but I'm asking the question. And the reason I say it is the second part of overwhelmed, emails. We spend 25% of our time answering emails. We're not getting work done, we're just responding to stuff, right? You're looking at your cell phone 150 times a day. Right now, some people in this room have looked at their cell phone 150 times since I started talking. That's okay. Nearly half this country believe you can't have a balanced family life. When I was growing up, I was in a one-income family. My parents were a one-income family. That is completely the exception now and not the rule. Everybody is a two-income family. Okay? I'd rather have more time than money is a significant thing. The problem is they want more time, but when they take time, it tends to be what's called tethered time off, right? Even when I'm on vacation, I'm connected. And people feel obliged to look at their emails or follow up with clients and customers and things like that. That's the way it is right now. And all of these communication tools, from Slack to email to all of the things we're doing, have not made life easier. They've made it more convenient, and they've made it less likely that people will actually take real time off. You're seeing the stress level go up. The number one Google trend in the workforce in the last 7 years has been time off and stress. There's a reason for that. So employees are getting fed up, and they're going to a place where they think they can have a better opportunity, whether that be more money, or a better atmosphere, or a dress code, or an opportunity for advancement or growth. They're leaving because they can. The next one is this. HR, by the way, I have a low opinion of most of your HR people, just so you know, not yours individually, but HR tends to be rule followers, and this is the way we've always done things, and that's not the way life is right now. And one of them is contract. How many people here have an employee handbook at their bank? Everybody, right? And that was written by your HR or your legal team, and it's 75 pages of what you can and cannot do in case of this, and it's designed to cover yourselves and things like that. And probably most of your key employees sign a contract that has 5 or 6 pages. Every year they do a performance review. At my wife's bank, she just finished 7 pages per employee of performance review. So we're doing this contract. But when we look at surveys, when we see surveys of our small business clients and most large clients, employees say they want to be trusted at work, they want to be valued, they're the happiest when they are appreciated and somebody cares at me. Does that sound like a contract to you? It does not to me. Because of this work-life blending, because of the fact that we're on 24/7, our expectations of work and life have blended together. And it's not a contract. Now, we might view it as a contract, and our lawyers and HR people may say, well, we have to have a contract. They're not viewing it that way. They're viewing it as, I want to make friends. I want to have a great opportunity. I want people to care about me. I want to contribute. That is not a contract. All right. Every time I mention my wife, she wants a commission. So honey, I will give you a commission today. So this is my wife, and she's a banker, so don't worry, and I will hear about this later. If our anniversary comes up in May, 10 years. If I said right before then, honey, I'm going to give you your performance review as a wife right now. Now, honey, I wanted to go to Cabo this year, but you wanted to go to Florida instead. So in terms of flexibility and adaptability, on a scale of 1 to 5, I'm only going to give you a 2. I need to see that improve next year. Otherwise, we're going to have another conversation. You bought me that shirt that I absolutely hated, and I have to give you a 3 on a scale of 1 to 5 for your judgment, and I didn't say anything about it, and I didn't mention it, but now I'm going to do it right now. Is it any wonder it took me 48 years to get married? That's not the way we would do a relationship. I would never do that. I wouldn't even think it. But that's the way we treat our employees who are looking to us to have this great relationship. And that needs to change. It's so easy to create positive moments. It's so easy to create an opportunity where people are happy. You know what the easiest way? Can everybody stand up for a second? Just 1 second. This is not a big deal. And just high five the person next to you real quick. Just high five. Ow! Not that hard. Wow. Just high five. It is physically impossible. Thank you. You can sit down now. It is physically impossible not to high five somebody without a smile. That took 2 seconds to create a positive moment. Right? Just 2 seconds. Thank you for the job you've done. Thank you for doing this project. I really appreciate the work you've done. This takes 2 seconds. We forget about it because we're so busy with everything else, and that is what is impactful. So when people come to you and say, we have this recognition program that's going to cost you $80,000 a year and it's going to give all these gifts, what people really want is to be heard and appreciated. That's all. It's not significant. Came out with a book, 9 Lies About Work, and one of them was, do people want feedback? Just like I did here. People want to be heard, and they want interaction with their boss. They want that opportunity to let their voices be heard, which is entirely different than feedback. So we should be in a position to be able to listen better. to hear what people are saying to us and go from there. So great employees want this, and this is based on our research, and I suspect your employees are the same way our clients are. Number one, they want to be around great employees. We talked about that a moment ago. Paid fairly, and they want to have transparency around it. We'll talk about pay in a moment. They want to know that they're making a difference, that they're making an impact, that they have a purpose, and that management has their back, that we're all in this together. Again, not difficult. All right, talent. Big topic among CEOs right now, especially when it comes to retention and hiring. You don't have to hire a full-time employee anymore. If you have a project, you can find a gig worker to do it. You can go on Upwork or Fiverr, or you can find somebody else to do these types of things. It's where the talent is. Whether it be graphic design, whether it be a specific project, it's not necessarily about hiring somebody or hiring somebody who's in your office every day. Really hard for a lot of business owners and CEOs to understand that, but a lot of work is getting done outside the office in these gig areas. Number two, experience. I've kind of alluded to this. Why do we say 5 years experience in IT? Why do we say 7 years in relationship banking? Most time, number one, because HR says it's always been done that way, but basically, we think we won't have to train people if we hire experienced people, which is nonsense. Our software is going to change every 2 years. Our culture is different. People are different. Expectations are different. You're going to have to train people no matter what they do. So why is experience so important? And I'll go further. Somebody with 7 years of experience in relationship banking, and they're applying for a job with you, what's their reason for applying for a job with you? Either they don't like what they're doing as a relationship banker, they don't like where they're doing it, who they're working for, or they're just looking for a money grab. So do we need 7 years, or can we find somebody with less experience who can bring more to the table, who's easier to train, learn, and develop? So a couple of questions for interviewing. The first thing I'm doing today when I interview for my own company is I want to make sure they want to work for me or my company. So the very first question I will ask somebody is, tell me everything you know about my company. Your first interview, your hiring manager's interview, tell me everything you know about the bank. And if they say, you have $600 million in assets and 12 employees, or something like that, they didn't do much research. They want a job more than they want a job working at your bank. Make sure they want to work for you. That's a way of identifying people who are going to align with your mission. And then a self-expectations and accountability question. Tim, I'm interviewing you. Suppose I make an offer today and you accept. Now, 6 months from now, you are totally happy working at the bank. You can't wait to go to work every day. What has happened to make you feel that way? What will it take to make you feel that way? And that Tim's answers will tell me what I need to do to manage him properly and what he expects of himself to be able to do those things. So the question is, if you're hired and you're really happy in 6 months, can't wait to come to work, what will it have taken for you to feel that way? 61% of employees quit because the job wasn't what they expected. If you have a candidate coming to you, make sure they talk to a number of employees. Not interviews, but go out and have coffee with people who are actually doing the job. Make sure they understand the goods and the bads and the uglies. Because we're there to sell, and we have a different view of what that employee does than what fellow employees do. So make sure everybody knows that. And then retention. HR will say, well, you have to retain people, and I know more business owners and CEOs who come to me and say, well, 21% of our employees have been here for 15 years or more. I'll say, that's great. In the last 5 years of all the people you've hired, how many people are still there? It's not about your 20-year employees. It's about the people you're hiring today. It's about that turnover. And if there is a problem with retention, it becomes this. Younger people will see no movement at the top, and they'll say, there's no room for me to advance. And they will leave. Longer-term employees tend to be much more resistant to the innovation that's needed in the marketplace today because they're viewing every change as how do I preserve my job versus what needs to be innovated, changed, and improved. I have a client that's a property management company. The owner, it's really hard to advise him because he's 82 years old and talks loudly and is several times a billionaire. And he has 12 people in finance when he could actually use 3. The problem is his 12 people have all been there for 30 years. They're well in their 60s, and they don't like Excel, so they use ledgers. I kid you not. It's hard to email them because they prefer phone calls because they don't like email. And we've been telling him, you need people who do different. He says, but they're loyal to me, and they've been here for a long time. Well, that's just great, but when somebody else takes over, they're going to have to get rid of all these people. Now, that's an extreme example of too long retention, but we have to take a look at that. It's really important. Don't buy into this term called culture fit. It was a big term up until a couple of years ago. It has died. Because if you hire people who think the same way and look and act the same way, you're going to get a whole bunch of people who only think the same way. You're not going to get people who think differently, who have a different perspective. This is the whole concept of inclusion. We want talented people who don't think the way we do. Now, they should align with what our values are, but you don't want a room full of yes people who think all the same way. In exit interviews, and we've done about 4,000 of them in the last 3 years, the vast majority of people leave because role stagnation. There wasn't an opportunity for me to grow. We see this in every industry, from nonprofit to banking to tech to professional services firms. Now, when there's role stagnation, it hits harder in a tight labor market, and this is the tightest labor market since the Korean War, right? And with small businesses, it doubles down again, because it's easier to advance in a huge company than it is a small business. It just is. And this is something we have to think about. You have to sit and think with employees and say, let's talk about a career path. And that career path may not necessarily be at our bank if you are ambitious and want to grow. Honesty needs to become a reality. So learning and skills, future of work. The more you can develop them, the happier they're going to be. I had a CFO say once, that's great, Eric, so I'll spend all this money on teaching them and developing them and they're just going to leave. I said, well, yeah, but what if you don't train them and they stay? You got to have it both ways. This is Mike Trout. Mike Trout is a baseball player for the Anaheim Angels. That shows you how old I am. Mike Trout is the highest paid player in Major League Baseball. This year he will make $37.7 million. He is the only one of the top 50 baseball players in the major leagues who has stayed with the same organization. Every other one of the top 50 highest paid baseball players had to leave their team in order to become one of the top 50 highest paid players. Why am I saying that? If you leave a company to go to a different company, you're going to make 33% more money than if you stayed at the same business. Why? Because if you stay at the same bank every year, what are you going to get? Cost of living, 1.87, 2.1% increase. If you go to a different bank, they're going to give you 10, 15% more. So if somebody leaves and goes to a different company 3 times in a 10-year period, they're going to make almost 40% more than somebody who stayed at the same company those 10 years. And still we insist on saying, well, cost of living is what you deserve. But it's not. We're not paying top talent what they deserve. At a different level, think about an entry-level position, a college graduate that we all covet. They'll start for $50,000, but in 3, because they have no experience. In 3 years, we will have trained them. They have all sorts of experience. They'll probably be making $62,000, but their market worth is probably $75,000 to $80,000. They're going to leave, and we sit there going, well, why did they leave? Because they can. Because they want to. And so there needs to be a different mindset that says, if we have a really great employee, maybe a 2% annual raise isn't the way to keep that employee a long time. Half of my company is owned by a CPA firm. Not big, about 60 employees, about $20 million. And they have a huge turnover in those younger ranks for all the reasons we talked about. Stagnation, they're not paying top of market. And they said, how do we keep our young people? I said, the only way I can think of is by paying them 25% higher than the market. They didn't seem to like that very much, but that's probably the only way. But if you value people, that's the way to do it. So I told you 3 years is the definition of a great hire. I meant it. Recruiting and retention needs to be at your level. Not just at HR's level, not just at a lower level, but at your level. It has to come from you. And managers on a hiring level, a branch level, every level, part of their job performance rating should be on the retention of their key employees. How well they recruit, what the turnover looks like, what job satisfaction looks like. We used to do engagement surveys, and we told a bank, here's the results of your overall bank. And boards of directors loved seeing that, but it wasn't actionable. And so now we do it by teams. If you have the relationship bankers, you have this branch, that branch, those types of things, because we can see numbers and we can take action based on that. It's about teams. And people say all the time, well, I don't like change. They shouldn't be in banking. 20 years ago, if you didn't like change, you probably had a great career in banking. But now that's not going to be the way it is. Some terms I don't like are flexibility. It has a bad connotation now, but I would change it to autonomy. Okay? And the reason I say that is flexibility, flex work has a negative connotation. Autonomous means different. So if somebody wants to work at home and they're a great employee, then make it autonomous. Because great employees will work just as productively at home than at work. Not everybody does. So you have to be real careful about who you do those types of things with. But if you give employees more control, you let them decide more things or where they work or how they do things, great employees will respond. Great employees will improve. It's proven time and time again. Bad employees won't. So if you give those great employees just a little bit more, they're going to give you more exponentially. They always do. Every study shows it. It's okay if people who are great leave your bank if they want to become a senior vice president and there wasn't a way. And what we're finding now is if you keep track of those people, a lot easier to keep track of them now, and especially in your industry, which tends to be very insular, if an employee had a great experience at your bank, they're going to be the first one to tell somebody else, I loved working there. Maybe I'll change the tone. Suppose you have a kid who's just graduating college, your son or your daughter. And your son or daughter comes to you and says, Dad, where should I work? Where should I go to work? And you might say, I'd want my son or daughter to work at a place where they can grow, they can learn, they can meet lifelong friends, they can make an impact, they meet people who can influence them, and things like that. That is what we call a destination employer. Some place where it's important to work, where your son or daughter graduating college can have a great experience. Finally, I want to talk just a little bit about leadership. The key words in leadership right now are trust and transparency, which are kind of commingled. I mentioned before we're at a leadership tipping point. Younger employees are changing the way we lead. The traditional ways aren't working. I talked about managers to teams. 10,000 boomers are retiring every day, most of them in leadership positions, and they're being replaced by people who are not senior leaders. Employees today know more than ever before. They're not afraid to say it. They know how much the banker is making down the street. They know how much everything is going on. They have Yelp, they have Glassdoor, they have all these websites that give them information. It's a different scenario now. And so this traditional concept of command and control, do what I say, is gone. People want coaching. They want mentoring. They want advice. And if your old leaders can't do that, they're going to go someplace where they can. And 10,000 of the old leaders are retiring every day. So, some things. Purpose is important for people. Development. Coaching, mentoring, advising. Not dictatorial styles. One-on-ones. Too often we emphasize a person's weaknesses. You have to improve this, you have to work on this, you have to work on that, rather than emphasizing strengths. The problem is this, and this is my opinion. If somebody works on their weaknesses all the time, at the end of the day, all they're going to have is a lot of strong weaknesses. I'd rather emphasize strengths and hire to weaknesses than try to do it the other way around. This whole work-life interaction. Too often we tend to promote somebody because they brought in the most deposits or loans, they're the hardest worker, they suck up the most. Better be careful about that. But if we're looking for future leaders, none of those skills really translates in the ability to effectively lead people. Matter of fact, I would say your best salespeople would be your lousiest leaders, because to be effective in sales, you need to be selfish. In leadership, you need to be able to create and value teams. So what's important in leadership today? Values. What's important to people? courage, the ability to have those difficult conversations, be able to say, if you continue to do this, you can't work here anymore. Humility and gratitude, something that is antithetical to the way I was raised in leadership. I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful to be able to work with you. You don't have to be... If I asked each of you, who's the best boss you ever worked for? And you think about that person, would you think one of the reasons that person was your best boss is because they were nice? I doubt it. I suspect your best boss was somebody who challenged you, made you be better, forced you to improve. So you don't have to be nice to be effective. Don't be a jackass, but don't be nice either. If there's one thing I could leave you with, it is one size fits one. What is meaningful to one person is different to another person. The key to successful leadership is to find out what is important to somebody and be able to deliver that each way so they can help you succeed. And then this term of emotional intelligence, great leaders understand people. They really understand what's going on. And they understand what it means to be an employee, to be able to want the coaching and mentoring and be able to deliver on that. So some takeaways, in addition to the ones I've given you. If I were you, I would do a survey, an anonymous survey right now, finding out what employees think, what's irritating them. One of my favorite open-ended questions is, if you were the CEO for a day, what's the first thing you would do at our bank? You will get more candid response, and most of it impactful. Once in a while we'll take a permanent vacation, but most of the time that doesn't happen. Not training, but development. In banks, that doesn't mean just training them in banking or their areas of expertise, but it means training them in different areas of banking. The future belongs to generalists, not specialists. So if you have people in one area who are great, how are we going to make them a leader of a bank? Because they need exposure, meaningful exposure, to all areas of a bank. At an agenda for your leadership retreat, if you have one, or a leadership meeting, what's that compelling reason a great employee would want to stay here or come here? And find out from everybody, have that conversation, because you're going to define your employee value proposition. You're going to start defining your culture. And don't say it's because of money, because if they come to you for salary, they're going to leave you for salary. So what's the compelling reason a great employee would want to work for you and stay there? Are we hiring for values? Are we promoting for values? Or are we hiring or promoting for rewards? Are we hiring somebody just because they brought in the most widgets? Or is it because this person has the best opportunity to lead our organization? Again, Steve will love this part, do a culture audit. He'll show you how tomorrow. So, big mistake. If you always say, well, that could never happen here, I'm here to tell you, yes, it can. If you're on the boards of nonprofits, yes, it can. 10 times worse at nonprofits. The worst Me Too moments I've had, investigations have happened at nonprofits. The essential competence to hire, promote, and look up to is character. If you hire for character, you can train for everything else. If somebody has the aptitude, the attitude, the ability to move and adapt and be agile, they're going to succeed. In leadership today, what you allow, you encourage. If there's that lousy employee who comes in late every day, who does a mediocre job, you are encouraging that person to continue to do that. You're encouraging everybody else around that bad employee to do the exact same thing. What you allow, you encourage. And then finally, trust and communication. The more you can communicate, the more they will trust you. The more candid you are, the more they will trust you. And that is the key to data leadership. So those are the 4 intersections of a great place to work. And I want to thank you all very much for your attention and your time. Thank you all very much.